So the G7 are going to be meeting up later on this week, and it's certainly looking to be quite an eventful meeting because, I mean, this is the first time in a long, long time that we're seeing progressive pushes from Washington, D.C. outward in terms of the situation of the global economy. So basically, you might have heard something about the global minimum corporate tax rate, right? The Joe Biden's administration is proposing essentially what they're saying is we're going to try and standardize the corporate tax rate minimum, not the maximum. So you can change it anywhere up from this number, but you can't make it lower, to try and make sure that giant corporations like Amazon and Google and Facebook and so on actually pay their fair share in taxes and stop sort of avoiding it by any means necessary and putting their stuff in offshore tax havens and stuff like that. So the policy is rumored to be sort of about 15%. That's probably where the minimum is going to be. It might get higher, but 15% is what we're looking at the moment. Now, that's obviously significantly lower than the current corporate tax rate in many developed countries and in some developing countries. But it is actually higher than some. So some countries will have to adjust their corporate tax rate. But it looks like the UK is trying to wiggle their way out of this, right? And it makes me very, very depressed to say that, obviously being from the UK. But the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has said that basically he's going to try and change the terms and conditions, essentially, so that the City of London can be exempt from this new this increase. Now, there's also talk of figuring out ways of making financial services, hedge funds, things like that, totally exempt from this anyway. But that would bring a whole load of complications. And with complications in tax law usually comes lots of new avenues that can be pursued as loopholes to avoid paying any tax or to reduce the amount of tax you pay as a very sort of wealthy or profitable organization or whatever it may be. So that's very concerning. But even if that doesn't happen and it's just the City of London at the G7, it gets agreed that the City of London will be exempt. That makes me worried because I think, well, if the City of London can be exempt, then why will the US not say, oh, well, why can't New York? And then won't Japan say, oh, well, why can't Tokyo? And then will China not say, well, why can't Singapore and Hong Kong? And then it'll just keep going on and on and on and on and on. So I do worry a lot about that. I think the UK is really, really not showing its best side in trying to make that happen. Let's be honest, the City of London, most of the wealth there is controlled by people who aren't actually British. They are foreign nationals who are very, very, very wealthy individuals. So, we need to be kind of taking back control, to use a very popular phrase with Brexiteers, of the finance capital that we have in the City of London. And what we need to also be showing is that we want to take back control of the housing market, and that fundamentally what Britain has to offer isn't just financial services, because right now that's essentially what we are projecting to the world through this, and sort of generally the way that the government is handling the economy, and the way that successive governments, Tory and Labour even, going way back to the Brown Blair years, that's what we've been projecting through our economic policy. I think Britain should become like a sort of industry leader, especially when it comes to renewable energy. I definitely think we could create our own version of Silicon Valley. I mean, in Ireland, they have the Silicon Bog, as it gets called. So why can't we have our own thing? I think we have some of the best and brightest scientists in the world, and I really wish that the kind of the angle the government were going for and the trajectory of the future of our economic policy was more centered on that, on innovation and on industry and energy and, infrastructure, those kind of things. But that's it. It sets a bad precedent, basically. And I really hope it doesn't kneecap the talks before they even get started, because let's not forget, the G7 is declining in its global influence constantly, and it has been for decades now. The G20 is far more all-encompassing when it comes to global influence. And the G7 has to come then to the G20 and say, right, okay, well, this is the plan we have. And it's not just about the global minimum tax rate. There's also going to be proposals being sort of thrown around for creating a sort of a type of tax that you can use to tax a company's profits in a particular market. So when a company makes massive profits in a certain country, they can't say, oh, we're not based there, so you don't get to tax us. And this kind of two-pronged approach, I think, could be very effective if done correctly and with the right motivation in mind. Because then you said a company, they have to pay this minimum global tax rate. And then on top of that, in the markets where they are profiting loads from consumers, they have to pay back into these countries that they have profited so much from. It only seems fair. So yeah, I think this is a good step forward. I was very pleasantly surprised when I heard the Biden administration was going for this. I think Joe Biden has been full of pleasant surprises so far as president. He's done a lot of things that I really disagree with. We did a video on this a little while ago about his support for Netanyahu and his lack of compassion and understanding towards the situation the Palestinian people are in, especially in Gaza. So he's made a lot of errors. I think foreign policy has been pretty bad, but this is actually a really positive sign from the Biden administration. I just hope that it's not just smoke and mirrors. I just hope that it's not not them just trying to appear like they're doing something about the big problems that we face, which I think, unfortunately, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement might have been a bit of that, because let's be honest, we need to do a lot more as a global community, and the US could be doing a lot more. So let's just hope that when the G7 goes to the G20, and these are countries like China, India, and Brazil are there, three of the fastest growing economies in the world, three of the strongest developing nations in the world. And a lot of economic predictions actually show that China and India will be the two wealthiest countries in the world in terms of GDP within 15, 20 years. China certainly, but India may overtake the US within a decade or two. So it's all very much up in the air. And it's unclear what's going to happen. But then after that, the G20 will then have to go to a meeting of 139 countries, supervised by, I forget the name of the organization, but it's essentially a global organization for economic cooperation between countries. And so the G20 will have to go to all of them and say that. So really, the G7 should be trying to smooth out these arrangements as much as possible, and the UK is throwing a spanner into the works, and it's very much not a welcome spanner into the works, because they're not trying to make things more progressive. They're not trying to make these giant corporations pay more in tax. They're not trying to create a more equitable global economic system for working people, no matter where they live, whether it's in Britain or Hungary or Estonia or South Africa, China, wherever it is. We should be creating a global economic system that's very much people-oriented, especially with, the way that automation's going. We should be living in a situation where you shouldn't be afraid that your job's going to be automated away. You should be glad, because then you're going to have more time to do stuff. But unfortunately, our own ability to afford the basic necessities to live is tied to our ability to be productive. And as machines become much better at everything, we're gonna see workers really struggling with that. The UK could have made some headway on that. So once again, we see a lack of vision and a lack of willingness to actually do what needs to be done, and fight for what's right and what's needed from the British government. Disappointing, but not at all surprising. But we have to take some of these hopeful moments as well. And I certainly hope that those two different new tax policies, end up being implemented on a global level. But I guess only time will tell. So we just have to hope and keep a close eye on the situation. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, if you liked it, then why not translate that into a digital form and click the like button? Or, even better, if you're feeling extra wild, subscribe and click the bell.